Welcome to the Advancement Podcast. Our mission is to reach the lost in America by advancing leaders and churches so that communities are transformed. Join us as we discuss how to stay healthy as leaders, work in teams, and lead change. Come on, let's advance together.
Welcome back to another episode of the Advancement Podcast. Hey, if you enjoy what you listen to, if you could click subscribe, that way every Tuesday and Thursday, the new episode comes directly to your inbox. If you love the podcast, if you could rate us, we would appreciate it. It helps us spread the message of advancement. If you're watching, you can click subscribe on YouTube or like on Facebook, and you will get the information as it comes to you every Tuesday and Thursday. My name is Todd Barham, the host of the Advancement Podcast, here with the lead consultant of Advancement, Timothy Ware. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Yeah, man.
You surviving?
I am. I looked at the monitor and I realized, man, this was part of my Father's Day shirts, and it's a busy shirt. Anybody that's watching online that happens to watch is going to go, wow.
Yeah, Tim's got a busy shirt on.
Marco, who was the producer when we first started this, he would not have let me wear this shirt. Yeah. He would have said, you can't do that. Yeah. You'll hurt somebody.
Well, I'm wearing camo, so you can't see me. I just blend in. You didn't even know I was here.
I did know. I did know.
If you couldn't hear me, you wouldn't be able to see me.
You are not the invisible man. I've never known you to be invisible in a room.
Yeah, well, yeah. Some of us aren't, I'm just not the shy type.
No, sir.
So, but it's funny, you learn more about yourself with your kids. One of my kids is very much like me, that she'll walk into a room and then, she's up in everybody's face and the center of attention. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
Maddie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, you said you have 3 sons, 1 daughter. It didn't take long to figure out.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
I'm glad you're with me. But some people out there may not know all my kids' names, so I'm helping them.
That's true. Uh-huh.
So we talked about change last time. And
yes.
you got in, we've talked about change the last 2 times.
Yes.
So if you're not listened to the other 2 episodes, we'd encourage you to
and
go do that.
These kind of, especially this one and the last one, kind of build on each other.
Because you're given 7 points. Last time you gave us 4.
7 elements of a culture of change. We talked in the first, we talked about the fact that a culture of change has strong vision, so that we're changing for a specific reason,
right,
and we're changing for an eternal reason, for a harvest reason. Then we talked about the fact that a culture of change has intentionality in it, that we're not making change random, but we're doing it intentionally, we're doing it specifically, and when we tell people that things need to happen, we're going to stand by our word. We're going to make that happen. The other one was that we need to have innovation, meaning that change is not copycatting all the time, but we're willing to say, okay, what do we need to do uniquely because of who we are, where we are, what God is asking us to do to reach the harvest He's asking us to reach.
Right.
So there's this piece of allow creativity to happen.
Right.
And then the last one that we talked about before was we talked about grief.
Okay.
That you have to make space for grief. And I still think that this is I've read lots of books on change. I'm writing on change. I'm writing a book on change. And I don't hear this struck me. I'll be honest, it wasn't in my original outline. And the idea of grief, it struck me recently, and I went back and started looking, and I realized
it's not really something talked about.
It's not something talked about, and it's really one of the reasons that probably we struggle, and that change, naturally people resist change, but if we're not allowed to grieve the past before moving into the future, we have to create those grief moments. I have just been kind of obsessed with that thought. I hate to say it, over the last few weeks, as I'm as I'm preparing and researching and to write, because when I realized how little, that's what's made COVID so difficult.
Yeah.
So difficult is that the change was forced on us. You know, when you think about this, I hope this isn't too morbid, but my father-in-law, when he passed away, we knew he had cancer.
Yeah.
And when we found out what was really going on, how bad it was, the doctor said, you've got 3 to 6 months. And he lasted 105 days or something. So we saw it coming. We were able to go through some of that. You know, the grief was spread out. We were able to walk through it together. Luckily, I've not in my family. Well, I'd take that back. I did have one. I had a great niece who we received a phone call one morning. She was 2 years old,
Yeah.
had gotten out into the backyard and drowned in the pool.
Ooh.
And when there's no preparation,
yeah, it's tough.
The grief, it feels heavier. It's it just, I mean, it hits you like a freight train. And I think what the church has experienced around COVID, when we were told you got to close.
Yeah.
Man,
that was tough.
Boom. It was like that. There was no ramp up.
Yeah, we closed down like 2 days before we had planned to have a service. I mean, it was no time at all.
And sometimes those moments like that where it comes unexpected, the grief lasts longer.
Yeah.
Because there was no preparation for the loss.
Well, and to that point, I mean, I had maybe canceled 1, maybe 2 services because of weather, my entire pastorate. And we went, I think we ended up 8 weeks. Some were 9, some are 10, 11, 12 weeks. I mean, it's tough. I mean, that's nothing we'd ever prepared for.
Yeah, I could really stop and talk a lot more, because I just think that I want to say again that I think this is one of the reasons that change is so difficult in the church and in organizations, is because as leaders, we don't do a good job of creating space for grief in the midst of change, to grieve the loss of what was so that we can be excited about what will be.
Yeah.
Okay.
So number 5.
So number 5, moving forward. So this is a new one to our listeners. This is, you're going to, in a culture of change, you also have to have consistency.
Okay.
When we were laying the foundation, we talked about the fact that Romans 12:1 says that we're being transformed. Mm-hmm. This is God is the God who doesn't change, whose mission is to change us, change all of humanity, whether it be the first change being coming to be a follower of him, to making other changes. So there should be consistency in the change, because that means that that is representative of the progressive transformation of Christ in our life or in our church.
Yeah.
We use the example of stagnancy previously. You know, that is where there's not a consistent change. You know, if we go back to that illustration of a river and then a swamp, you know, basically that swamp water's not moving. Mm-hmm. You know, out at our place, we have a tank, a pond that was dug, and the water's just there.
Yeah.
But when we get a big enough rain, it overflows and everything's cleaned out and it's pure. So when there's not consistency, the only thing that really brings freshness is a flood and a radical change, kind of like COVID.
Yeah.
COVID forced people to do some things that they weren't willing to do beforehand. And so how do we maintain consistency is, I know that's what you're about to ask.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, how do you maintain it? Because that's one of the hardest things that we have to deal with in the church is how do we maintain consistency? Because we in churches a lot of times, even especially during COVID, consistency is tough.
I have Mike, my friend, our friend, he used the phrase that people can come to the place where it's the expected unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
Surprises are only good so long. Eventually people don't like, most people don't like a surprise party. It feels good for a moment, but it's also the joy of that moment. You can't live with everything being a surprise, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So consistency. So if people know, okay, when I come to church, it's more than just pastor's going to preach something different. We're going to sing. I have had people say, "Well, you preach a different sermon every week, and we sing different songs. That's consistent change." And I go, "No, that's not necessarily consistent change. Consistent change would be learning a new song every 6-8 weeks and taking one we've been singing for years and deciding not to sing it again."
Mm-hmm.
Taking it off the list. Consistent change would be one of the ways that I recommend people create a consistent change is to visually do it, is that every year you redo the backdrop of your stage.
Okay.
And then 3 or 4 or 5 times a year, decorate the stage
differently
for a sermon series,
mm-hmm.
so that it's different.
Yeah.
Because creating that so that there's some consistency in that. Now your people are used to regular change pieces that come. So annually redo your stage.
Yeah.
Your base, what we would say is your base backdrop, and then 2 or 3, 4 times a year for a sermon series, redo it. Do something special there. Another way to do this is to take advantage of the seasons of the year. That when you can do this in your kids' areas, you can do this anywhere. When summer comes, you can do something special for the summer.
Yeah.
You can do something special for Christmas or Easter or the winter or the New Year. Just take advantage of some of that, because change is happening constantly.
Yeah.
The truth is that consistent change in nature creates healthy growth.
Yeah.
Creates healthy growth. The places where there's little change is the tundra and the desert.
Both where there's not a lot of life.
Both where there's not much life.
Yeah.
That's exactly the point. Well, that's right. And so consistent transformation, how do we create consistency? There are some other simple things. Plan it into your annual budget.
Okay.
By saying what part of the facilities needs spruced up this year.
Yeah.
It could be simple. It could be as simple as a paint job to a full remodel, whether it be your foyer, whether it be bathrooms, whether it be the nursery, whether it be the children. Pick an area and say we're gonna update. That's the phrase. Updating is changing, but we're gonna. So that again, it's about creating consistency, so that when we do make another shift, a directional shift, a methodological shift, it kind of feels like, well, we're kind of used to things being churning over.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to create some of that. I would say, and you have to talk about it.
Yeah.
You have to not only talk about the changes you're making, but you have to talk about the fact that God is a transforming God, which leads us into the sixth element of a culture of change. It's a culture of fluid and open communication.
Okay.
Where you talk about change.
Yeah.
And people can voice their opinion, like it, dislike it, want it, not want it.
Well, I found with people, the less you talk about change, the more it fuels them to be upset about change.
That's right.
I mean, if you're open and upfront with, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what's going to happen. Yes, these are some of the downfalls that may come of it. You know, yes, we're building a building. Yes, we're taking on a little bit of debt, but this is the, and it seems to me the more you can communicate as a leader, the more relaxed people get about the change. Now, that doesn't mean they're always going to like it.
No,
but it's when you dictate the dialogue instead of someone else, I think that helps a lot.
Let's take a moment and hear a word about advancement.
Do you feel like your church is stuck in a rut? Then we've got the answer for you here at Advancement. Do you need some personal coaching or maybe some leadership coaching? We can help you out. Contact the Advancement team at info@advancement.cc or check out the website at advancement.cc.
Now let's get back to the podcast.
At least
healthy change doesn't take place in the dark.
Yeah.
If all the decisions are made and all of a sudden there's this big unveiling, boom, it's going to fall flat, or you end up with rebellion. It's not going to be accepted, or people are going to feel like you've deceived us.
Kind of like with COVID.
Kind of like with COVID. But can you see those first five?
Yeah.
Communication is tied to, we have to talk about the vision, which is why we're going to do it, and we have to communicate why we're making the change, because it's got that eternal peace.
Yeah.
We're going to communicate, these are the intentional things we're going to do. These are the things, this is where we've taken it from here, we borrowed something from there, but we made it our own by doing this. Yeah. It's guys, we know that some of you, this is going to be hard for you, and we want to, and we want to create a time for you to, we're not necessarily going to tell them we're going to create a time for them to grieve, but you may. But we acknowledge that. And consistency. Hey, we're doing this, we're doing it. You realize that if you don't have a culture of open communication, all of those first five are ineffective.
Right.
All of them.
Doesn't help.
None of them. You can't do any of that in the dark. So that's why this is about communication. And as you noted at the end of the last episode, the moment you're tired of talking about it,
they're just about to start to get it.
About starting to get it. And then that leads us to number 7, the 7th element. So vision, intentionality, innovation, space for grief, consistency, communication, and then the last one is accountability.
Yeah.
A culture of change always has a culture contains accountability. Number 1, if I'm the leader and I say we're doing it for this reason, and then we don't pursue that reason, then it becomes, well, why did we make the change?
Yeah.
So this is leadership being held accountable for following through on what they've said.
Yeah.
When churches have us in, one of our advancement teams in for a full consultation process, one of the biggest mistakes I see pastors make, because we come in and this is a setup for this congregation to do something fresh, to make a change, is to then not do anything.
Yeah.
And this is where accountability comes in. Pastor, churches will say, well, you spent all that money and we invested all that time and then did nothing. Your credibility as a leader goes down when you don't allow someone to hold you accountable and you don't take action.
Yeah.
I think we have to be accountable for the pace.
Yeah. Can't push them too hard.
Every time I say pace, you feel like, because you like to run so hard.
Yeah. If I could get stallions to run with me, we could change the world, but it's pace, man. It's pace. Don't leave dead bodies in your wake.
That's right. Don't leave dead bodies in your wake. I've got enough behind me that I can testify to that. But we have to be accountable for the pace. I think. See, vision can drive fast. That's one of the reasons I think that the innovation piece, taking time to not just copycat, but stopping to look at it and test two or three or four things and before committing and making it your own, that sets your pace where people have a chance to adjust before they dive in.
Right.
And also creating space for grief, that slows down the leader who likes to run. It slows us down.
Yeah.
Now, for the leader who's saying, well, I don't like change, well, I hope the pressure of the harvest and being intentional, people need to hold you accountable for doing those things.
Yeah.
And for the person who runs, you need to be held accountable for the things that slow you down, because the organization can only move so fast. And here's the big deal. The larger the church, the slower it can change.
Thanks for reminding me. Yeah, and sometimes I miss the brand new church planning days because we could change on a dime.
Yeah.
But now, if I want to change anything, I've got 2 or 3 meetings before I can do anything, just to make sure everybody's on the same page and nobody feels like I did something without, that I did something in the dark without being accountable to other people. It's different, and I think some pastors long to be in the larger churches, but what I would say to them is relish the days that you can make some decisions on your own and not have to have 52 meetings with people. Now, I know we all want to get there, and I know we all want to grow our churches, but understand the fact the more your church grows, the more you're going to have more meetings. When you have change, you're going to have to explain yourself more. It just becomes harder the more you grow.
Well, that's what we could talk for a long time on, the need for intentionality, and even another word is strategy.
Yeah.
The larger you go, the more strategic you have to be in making changes, because you just, there's no fly by the seat of your pants at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and the more you just make decisions that don't work, the more you have to have meetings to explain yourself and what happens. And I've got so many stories there.
Yeah. I think in today's world, the difficulty is that leadership, we want to hold all the leaders accountable.
Yeah.
But there is the side that leadership has to hold everyone else accountable.
Yeah.
People want to, accountability is just not very popular. We've talked about this again and again.
We
and
don't
again.
like it.
It's just not something in our society that's popular.
Yeah.
But the truth is, where there's no accountability, there's actually no structure.
Yeah.
There's no organized. Paul says to hold people accountable. Jesus says to hold people accountable. And so there's an accountability piece that has to flow. Now hear what I'm fixing to say. Accountability always goes both ways.
Yeah.
Accountability is not a one-way street. If it is not both leadership being accountable to congregations and boards and staff and pastors, holding each one, accountability must go both ways. Otherwise, it will not work.
Yeah.
It will not work. And so it's going to be broken. What's going to eventually happen is you're going to end up with abuse, or you're going to end up with rebellion.
Yeah.
And so you have to make sure that accountability flows both ways.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important that each group in this culture of accountability, or this culture of change, part of what we have to do is hold people accountable.
Yeah.
For consistent transformation. The truth is, you can take accountability. We said that the first 5 were built on communication, or we're gonna fail without number 6. And the truth is that all the first 6, where there's no accountability, you're not going to have a true culture of change, because everything's going to go awry.
Yeah.
So those things have to be there to anchor and hold it. I mean, somebody's got to hold you accountable for, did you communicate or at least try?
Yeah.
What I know is I have tried to communicate change well, and I thought I did a good job, but somebody didn't get it, or somebody didn't hear it, or whatever.
And sometimes you just need people to tell you where you've missed it, so that you can help fill in the gaps for everybody else.
Yeah. So
and sometimes it just helps you know where you're being effective and where you're not being effective.
Right. Yeah. Okay. 7 elements, or in a
You're
culture
very
of change.
spiritual today. 7. You're giving out 7. Tim's beating his head against the wall. For those of you listening,
I'm not into biblical numerology. I mean, I know a lot of people that are, and if you
except
are, great.
Except today, 7
was not intentional. This is days of processing and thinking. Okay, what are those elements of our culture?
So give him the 7 one more time.
So clear vision that ties us to an eternal thing. The intentionality, that we will take intentional steps to make sure and get it done. Innovation, which is where there's testing, there's trial, there's learning from others, and then creating something specific that works for who we are, who God's called us to be, and reaching the harvest He's called us to reach. And then we're going to make space for people to grieve the loss of what was as we move into the newness of the change, that there will be consistency in the transformation, that there will be consistency of change, so that we're, like a running river, there's freshness instead of the stagnancy of a swamp, that there is communication, open communication about the change, about why we're making it, about where we're going and how, as much as possible, and then that there is space, that there's accountability.
Yeah,
those 7 things are present in every culture of change I've been able to identify or develop.
Okay.
All right. Takeaway.
I like what you said about do some change elements frequently to get people to used to change. I'll do that consistently. My architecture doesn't really lead to changing the stage.
Sure it does.
It's hard. We do change it often, but one thing that I do is I'll change up the order of service just to catch them off guard, and just to keep them used to it. Like if I have a message on worship, I'll flip-flop. I'll preach first on worship and then have them worship and stuff like that. So that I think that's good. If we create in them something where they're always on their toes, it's not going to be a surprise to them when we change something else. So, or as hard for them to deal with.
Now, I will say, this does not mean, because there are a lot of people that are really connected. Their worship in our friends in our mainline churches.
Yeah.
Some of those traditions come from really deep spiritual places.
Yeah.
And we're not saying throw those things out.
Right.
But we are saying that sometimes there's a fresh way you can participate in them.
Sure.
And it's not to say that they, as part of your change moment, that in your consistency of doing things, that you can't say, hey, we're going to do something highly traditional.
Sure.
And then we're not,
Yeah.
So, all right.
Thanks, Tim. We'll see you next time.
What?
We'll see you next time on the Advancement Podcast.
All right.
If you would like to keep this content coming, all Tim and Todd ask is $1 per show. See how to give, maybe even sponsor an episode or series on the website advancement.cc. Until next week, continue to advance the mission of Jesus.